Too broad my sight to see what sunlight dappled subtlety with which the landscape's made. What quiet songs score the glade I traverse with headphones. My appreciation set for red zones. Every blessing's insignificant, and the present, smallest of all, seen from too tall, entirely unmagnificent.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Solacene. On this week's episode, we're talking about little, nice things. My favorite topic.
Yeah, and mine too, that's why I like you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of filling the episode with things about the Solacene, the ideal, beautiful, sustainable, tactile future, patent pending, that probably none of which individually deserve a full episode or could fill a full episode, but together we'll hopefully make, 40 minutes of little nice things to make people smile.
It's like a gallery.
Yeah, okay.
Have you ever been to a mini gallery?
No.
There's been a few that I've seen and visited, and it's a gallery of art and sculptures and little nice things.
Yeah.
And everything has to be mini.
Was it? Oh, okay. I thought you just meant the size of the gallery.
No, the things are mini in the gallery. So that's what this is in audio form. And your poem obviously alluded to big and small nice things.
Yeah, I mean, it's autumn now. We're in like the peak of autumn. Mm-hmm. And we use the analogy of the banana because we always say bananas are the most frustrating of fruits, or as some people might call them, berries, because when you have them in your home, they are green one second, brown the next, and you get like such a small window to enjoy the actual yellow, perfectly ripe. Mm-hmm. And it's like that with autumn. I mean, right now is the yellow banana, but next week when we record this, all these leaves will be gone, and it's going to be the brown banana. Yeah, the brown banana, exactly. Yeah. And so I was just pondering that, and present, a very small thing. Obviously, it's not the most relevant for the Solacene, which is all about living in the future and ignoring the present. But yeah, it's a good inspiration for a poem. Speaking of good inspirations, if people want to inspire themselves by reading our zines, they can go on the website, which is linked in the description to the episode. And on the website, you can also find our emails to contact us with any hate mail. Or you can sign up for Field Notes, which is a weekly inbox thing every Friday. You take over.
Okay. So on the website, we have links to the zines that we sell, one for the education semester and one for the degrowth semester. And then you can also sign up for our storytelling series version of the zine, which is a weekly delivery to your inbox, which is a letter from Aaron and I about life, moments that we enjoy, pictures that we enjoy, and it kind of changes up every week, but you can subscribe to what we call Field Notes there, and that'll continue on through the future semesters because we really like writing them. Book club also is a thing. If you'd like to join the book club, you can send us an email. Our emails are in the description, or a message on Instagram, or a pigeon, and we will add you to the book club group chat. We are reading The Overstory. It's a wonderful book, and it's a wonderful time to meet new people and read new books.
So that was boring introduction. You can start off.
Whoop. So I don't think I've ever been so excited to record an episode. So bear with me if I get
passionate.
So my first little nice thing is dried/edible flowers. Is there anything nicer? I mean, flowers are my favorite thing in the whole entire world. They're beautiful. There's so much variety. A lot of other species in nature, or families of species. It's like tree is a tree. You have your coniferous trees, or you have your leafy trees, and they're nice. But then flowers, there's flowers on trees. There's flowers on shrubs. There's standalone flowers with stems. There's ones with a bunch of petals. One with just like 3 petals. Flowers are incredible. And the reason I chose dried/edible flowers is because in the current world, there's plenty of flowers. There's enough. There could be more. But there's not enough dried flowers. And the thing with dried flowers is that they're ancient. They've always been a practice of drying flowers and using them for ceremonies. They were used in ancient Olympics as a prize. You'd have those crowns of leaves and flowers. For the champions, people would dry them, put them in their homes, dry them, put them in graves. And I just think it's a really intentional thing that we lack. So a lot of the things that we do today, it's like, okay, I'm going to plant a flower bed. It dies. But to have the foresight to harvest the flowers at a certain point, not too early because then you don't get to enjoy them alive, to then bring them into your home, perhaps leave them in a vase for a few days, still alive, and then think, winter's coming. There's going to be no flowers. Perhaps I should preserve these to keep some color in my life in the winter.
Did you know that I tried to dry a flower once?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't tell you because it seemed like such a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my idea, it was my mum's idea. After prom, high school, graduation, something like that, there was some significant flower, or at the time it seemed significant. And she said, why don't you press it? And I was like, okay. But it didn't, it just kind of rotted.
Yeah. It's a practice. Like, you need to know how to do it.
I thought you just squeezed.
No.
See, I tried to press it in my hand.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of techniques to drying flowers. You can microwave them. You can obviously press them in books.
Yeah.
But it depends on the type of flower. You need to have the right... You can't just throw it in a book because then it will ruin the pages. Sometimes you have to put parchment or tissues. There's a lot of things. And it's... In Japan, it was a legit art form and still is to make pictures out of pressed flowers, and I could never. But I just think in the Solacene there'll be more dried flowers. And the reason I added edible flowers is because they're just so easy to, like, add to things.
I don't think I've ever eaten a flower.
Really?
Although maybe asparagus. Isn't that technically a flower?
Perhaps.
Asparagus, is it called crowns?
Yeah.
Maybe
it
I
might
just
be.
made that up. I don't know.
I mean, you've probably had lavender and things.
But I've never eaten a flower, which is what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, you can in the Solacene.
Yeah.
There'll be more dried and edible flowers, and I just love them. Also, I also added under this one, flowers in your hair. We don't wear flowers in our hair at all.
That's true.
But in the Solacene, I think there'll be a few more little flowers tucked behind the ears or flower crowns. I like making those.
Tells me you might have been inspired a little bit by the film we watched last night.
I chose this before we watched the film, actually.
Sure. It was a Scooby-Doo film where Shaggy met a girl who later turned out to be an alien, spoilers, who wore flowers in her hair. Anyway, my first choice for a little nice thing, kind of a big nice thing. I guess I kind of cheat on some of these. But I mean, most of the small nice things that we like in life, or many of them anyway, are symptomatic of a big nice thing being like a big nice structure. Yeah. So that's why I don't think this is entirely separate from what we've been talking about on Solacene for the most part anyway. First one is library reading challenges, the likes of which I used to do a lot every summer when I was a kid, and I'm sure they still do for kids these days. Unfortunately, I spent many years in the wilderness without a town library, which was itself a frustration. But now that we're back in a city and there's libraries all over the place, I wish that they handed out one of those little maps. It was a little paper brochure, which is what I used to get, laminated though, I think, where it listed them all like in Mario with the overworld, different levels. The books that you were supposed to read and even the order that I think you were supposed to read them in. And I think this for adults would just be excellent. What do you think to that?
I could not agree more. I mean, I asked in the book club, the one attendee who attended last week, I said, why did you join? And they said, because I wanted a reason to read, kind of an excuse or like someone to hold me accountable. And I said, well, that's why I started the book club. So it's like book clubs are kind of that for adults, but I like the idea of it being facilitated through a library.
Here's the thing. Here's what I was thinking with this. So this is obviously an idea for ways that adults can meet each other through shared interests, but also you don't have to be that interested in something to read about it. My thing with book clubs, I find, or just most communities in general, and I'm not sure if this is because of the internet kind of leading the way and then real life following in its wake, I feel like many communities for adults are so niche. So if you join a book club, everyone there is going to be a big reader. But you might just be a small reader. Or if you join like a video game club or team, everyone there is obviously going to be huge into that. Or the same with board games or sports or whatever it may be. And I feel that's a big difference from when you were a kid. It was an after-school club, and the only thing uniting you all was that you were there after school. So you were a student. Like that was... The common denominator was a lot smaller, basically. And yeah, I think we experienced this a lot in university as well, because it was almost a myth of a university having hundreds of societies, because when you went down that were easily accessible, because when you went down the list, probably like half of them you just genuinely weren't eligible for.
Like the psychology club.
Yeah, psychology students club, or
Yeah.
like Jewish student union or whatever. And then you go into like the interest ones, and everyone in those societies is very, very deep into that interest.
Mhm.
So normal people, I don't want to say normal people, but how can I say it in like
You're jack of all trades.
Yeah, well, I'll just say the casuals. A library, what I like about, the reason I said this instead of a book club is that it's for more casual readers, the library reading challenge. I was also thinking a little bit about Whisper of the Heart, which is a Ghibli movie, and there's a coincidence where the two characters meet cute, by observing, oh, he's taking out a lot of the same books as me, because she saw his name in the little paper library card. Unfortunately, we don't have those anymore, which means I'll never meet somebody that way. But this is kind of like that, because you're all reading the same thing, but since it's not a book club, you're not actually required to be very booky to people about it, if that makes any sense.
You can just read the book and say, I didn't get that, and kind of move on to the next one. Whereas with a book club, I feel like you read a chapter and maybe you don't get it, but then you feel like you need to get it in order to discuss it. So that might be a bit more pressure than if it was just reading for the sake of reading.
Yeah. On that note, this is like a little bit separate, and it's more of a little bad thing, but also I thought it was this idea I read on the internet this week, which I'd never thought of before, and it was that one of the reasons real life socialization is kind of crumbling a little bit is because we're not interested in each other the way we used to be, like 30 years ago or something, pre-internet. And one of the reasons for that is that we have so many opportunities now, one-way conversations, parasocial, like the people listening to this, I guess. Like if you are really into the environment, instead of talking to the people in your office about it, who most likely aren't that into it, you can just listen to podcasts about the environment by people who are like specialists in it. And what that does is it kind of does to conversations what Photoshop and photo filters do to like people looking nice. You know what I mean? Because then you don't see people in real life as that fascinating, because, well, I know all these people online and they raise the standard too high. It's kind of like that.
No, I think that's interesting. And we've talked about before in university why people were so afraid to speak, because you were like, well, everyone's probably heard this thought before because I got it off of something I read online, which everyone's probably read. So then you're kind of nervous to speak. And then if you do say anything that hasn't been codified through internet communities, the reception might be bad. Yeah. Because people are like, oh, I don't know about that. And then, but had it been cycled through the internet and kind of like approved by that community, like I'm thinking sustainability because that's what I studied, but like if you said anything that wasn't from the internet or from articles that you'd read, it was kind of nerve-wracking.
There was also this idea kind of related about conversation being a positive feedback loop, or just a feedback loop where because of this, people talk less. And so when they talk to people, they're worse at it. Both parties are worse at it. And so you come away from it being like, well, that wasn't worth it. And so then you talk less. And it's kind of like that.
Yeah. And I think we need to, this is my motivational tip, like push through the first few conversations you have with somebody to kind of, because that builds comfort and like fluidity in the relationship. And then on your like second or third time that you talk to them, you can kind of get to some deeper things. But you need to be comfortable. And it takes a little bit of perseverance in like the boring conversations. I met someone new this morning and she was incredible. I really liked her. But the conversation was just about work, about our lives, about our city. But I know that the next time we meet up, we'll be able to get to some deeper things. That's how it always happens.
The hurdle of small talk.
My next little nice thing is one of my favorite things about life. And I mean, these things seem so dramatic when they're actually just so insignificant. But I really, really, really like hand-painted signs.
They're not insignificant, though. I'm just going to fix you right there.
Okay.
Like my poem is kind of making fun of that. It says, like, at the end, the present, smallest of all. So that's, like, ironic because it's really the only thing that in which we live, seen from too tall. So, like, if your perspective is the wrong way, then you're always living in the other states. And so you're ignoring the present, which is all that matters, entirely unmagnificent. It's like, but those are the things that almost all life is. Like, most of the reasons that you smile or I smile and I'm happy is little nice things. Like I say, many of which are the tips of icebergs of big nice things, but I'd call them insignificant.
Okay. So I really like hand-painted signs.
Yeah.
Specifically handmade like shop signs or business signs, which is very capitalist of me because that's basically the foundation of branding, was from people thinking I want to make a cool sign for my shop, and that's how everything spiraled out of control. But I really, really like when people still nowadays choose to have hand-painted signs because they take like 100 times more work than just getting one printed at a print shop. And they take a lot of upkeep because obviously if it's hand-painted or even if it's chiseled into wood, it degrades, whereas the plastic version wouldn't. And they're just so wonderful. They stand out so much. But when you walk around a town that chooses to have, perhaps it's a historic town, like everything's being preserved for the heritage, it's just so nice when everything's hand done, because then you haven't seen it a million times. It hasn't been made in Canva. It might have some mistakes. It might be kind of wearing away, but it just has so much more character than the printed ones.
Do you have anything in mind? Do you have a particular one in mind that you like?
There's one in particular that I always remember, and it was for a bookstore in my hometown. And because it was the only hand-painted sign in town, I always thought that it was just leftover from an old store that hadn't been taken down, basically. But then at some point in my life, I learned, no, there's a bookstore in there, and that's just like their sign. And it was just such a great hidden gem because the sign stood out so much, but in like almost a negative way of me thinking, oh, it's not even a store anymore. But obviously it speaks to the character of the store, which was super old-fashioned, cash only, just a man sitting in the back reading with his thousands of books that he's selling. And I really liked it.
I like those too.
Yeah.
We saw some nice ones in Greece and Italy, right? Especially that one from the
yogurt store.
Yeah, the dairy store. That was such a cool logo.
Yeah. And I think it's wonderful. I also said labels because I like when you have a pantry and everything's labeled, or when you have a product and the labels are handmade, because it stands out so much and it takes so much time. Therefore, you know that the product hasn't been rushed. I was really angry, you may remember, when I learned that the jam brand, it's called Mama.
Yeah, I do remember this.
I thought it was just a local Montreal jam brand because they put them in mason jars, just the mason jars you'd buy like at the dollar store for making jam, and the logo looked like it was printed on just like a home printer. And then we were in Paris and I was like, they sell this here?
It's deceitful corporations.
And then you realize it's just a marketing ploy.
Okay, my next little nice thing, very, very small, sunlight. Particularly sunlight in schools and offices, places of work, retail, etc. When I was thinking about this, I started out with schools because that was my experience. Then I went to offices, even though I've never worked in an office. I think I would dislike it. But then I was just thinking about all the other workplaces people have where they don't see the sun for 6, 8, 10 hours maybe. Some hospitals probably. And I was thinking in the Solacene, I don't know if there'll be some kind of mandatory quota, like with decibel levels or with pollution in the air or something, about there needs to be this amount of sunlight or you get a designated break or something. But it's just this idea that we take care of houseplants better in this regard than we do humans. There's this quote, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I really think that's true. I mean, there's like hundreds of statistics about how sunlight is just almost immeasurably better for your health as well as your happiness. We experienced it recently on our trip to Europe because I got the impression that even more so than seeing so many wonderful historical sites and cultural, novelties to us, was the fact that we were outside all day, every day. And you just, like, there was no coughing. There was no sneezing. There was no, tiredness. It was just, you felt rejuvenated every day. And I thought, well, this is how humans are supposed to be. We're kind of in a tough spot because we live in Canada where many months of the year there just isn't that much sunlight anyway. Everyone's vitamin D deficient, aren't they? Majorly so. Sunlight. That's my little nice thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My next little nice thing is a huge group of little nice things that I chose to restrain myself by just listing them and then saying why I like them as a whole. Because I was going to basically, this list could have been my whole list. But details on clothing, so embroidery, frills, lace, and buttons. I love those things because we tend to be very utilitarian in our design, and perhaps, yeah, we all have a million t-shirts, they all have different cool logos on them, but those are just like 2D details. But I like 3D details on clothing.
Textures,
yeah. I mean, the buttons on my jumper are little knots, and then I love when buttons are covered with the fabric of the clothing to match. And lace making as a industry has basically become extinct. There's like a handful of lace makers left in the world, and when I learned that, it made me very sad because people used to make lace and it was a craft and a meditation basically to make a piece of lace and then add it to an apron or a dress or a shirt. And now, yeah, it's just a completely dead art basically because it takes literally months to make a single piece of lace by hand versus doing it on a machine, which can be done in minutes. And that just made me sad. And I just love details on clothes. And I wanted to talk specifically about aprons.
Do you think, before we get to the aprons, do you think cartoons have had an influence on this? It just came to my mind when you say that. Do you think the fact that we grow up watching Arthur, who only wears 2 colors every single day, by the way, and Buster, who does the same, and Patrick, who only doesn't even wear a shirt, just shorts, very, very simple, not very... Do you think that's had any kind of impact?
Probably.
I think it has. It has. I think that has, and I also think sports has, because now everyone always dresses like they're going to a sports match to play in it, let alone just to watch it. And obviously athletes can't and don't wear any of the ornamentations that you're talking about, so yeah.
Yeah, I also think even just growing up watching Disney Channel, I always was fascinated with the clothes that the characters would wear because they were always without logos, without details. They were just like garment. And I think that had an impact on us for sure. Because obviously if you were trying to dress an entire cast in these super detailed clothes, that's what you win Oscars for. It's not what you get paid to do on the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, it would just be crazy if everyone was wearing ornate clothing. And yeah, it's also way more practical for mass production of clothes and fast fashion and
Yeah, maybe we can be influencers. People watching the podcast on YouTube, which you can do, they'll see our details and they will want to dress like us.
Stripes. Stripey and the stripe. But aprons. I want to talk about aprons because they're a little nice thing that I want there to be more of in the Solacene. Because they're great because you can wear your clothes that you want to wear and not have to change a bunch of times. Because I always struggle with not wanting to ruin my nice clothes and then I'd wear some more scrappy clothes when I'm baking or painting or gardening. And I think if we brought back aprons into fashion, we could use them to protect our clothes. And I just like because historically aprons were obviously super practical to protect clothes because you didn't have many clothes. But people would always embroider them and decorate them and take great pride in them, despite them basically being your paint shirt or like the shirt you wear when you're helping someone move.
Yeah.
Like they're the equivalent of that, but people still took pride in them because they were just an everyday object.
It's umbrella theory also. They look cool because if someone's wearing an apron, you know they mean business. You know they're actually doing something. Because no one's wearing an apron just to sit down and watch TV. It's
true.
It means they're getting elbow deep in the flour or the soil or the roofing, I don't know, whatever, something like that. They're doing something. And any clothing which is made for doing things, I will always support that little nice thing. My next one, I told you it yesterday because we were having a conversation about it, is... You don't remember. Nice to know how much stock you put into our talks. Holding hands.
I didn't want to spoil it. I thought you wanted to say it. Okay,
no, I was setting the stage for you.
Oh.
Specifically holding hands platonically, which again, like the library reading list, was something that was commonplace, at least in my childhood. I remember holding hands with like my male friends and some of the female ones as well. Less so, but it happened, and it didn't mean like...
Oh, sure.
No, it did. And it didn't mean like, oh, they're in a relationship, or among boys, like, oh, they must be G-A-Y. It didn't mean that. It was just like, you're friends, so that's what you do. Similar with hugs. And I think, I mean, there's many reasons why this has decreased in men. I was telling you, I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the podcast, but one of my least favorite words is bromance, because it's like, just call it friendship. Why has that term gone so out of style? But in some cultures, I know like holding hands among men is still a thing today, and obviously it was like, it didn't used to just mean romance. So I wonder, I mean, I have some thoughts, but I think it's sad, should I say, that it has completely resigned itself to this narrower and narrower part of people's lives. And because of the current like dating landscape being all fraught with issues, I wanted to talk about that in a little nice thing, but then I realized I don't know much about dating because I never really did it.
Yeah.
I think so many people are just completely devoid of any kind of intimacy, because any human touch, for instance, that is only romantic now. Like there's no holding hands among friends. There's very few hugs among friends, especially men. And I think that is resulting in a lot of lonely people. But also I wanted to talk about the fact that so many people, I think, listening would be like, but I don't want to hold hands with people. And I agree. I don't want to hold hands with people either. But we think that because we've grown up in this entirely touchless, introvert producing landscape, which is a spiritual, what should I say? There's no shared notion of humanity anymore. Let me put it like that.
Yeah, that's something that I think about quite often, that I wish I was a more touchy person, because I'm almost certain that as humans we need physical intimacy with people, but not always in a romantic way. And it's sad because I feel like even with kids, it's like, as you were saying, if you and your like gal pal were holding hands as kids, people would all be like, oh, they're boyfriend and girlfriend.
I wanted to talk about that on this episode.
It's hard to talk about because it's like, I mean, it would be weeks and weeks to unpack basically the way that we got to this point.
Maybe when we do our dating semester.
Yeah, I don't know how. And I feel like it's not like two guys are afraid to hold hands because they'll look romantic. It's like, there's a lot more to it than that.
Well, yeah, but that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons, but it's like, there's just so much more to it than that. I'd be like, are they like sibling? Like, I feel like there'd just be so many questions, and it would be just not worth the expectation that you have when you go out into public. And yeah, I don't know. I wish we were just more like chill with people.
I wish well, the way of putting that is I wish we liked each other more. In the Solacene, I think we will like each other more, and this will be the tip of that iceberg. I wrote down that I feel this might be me projecting, I really hope not, but I feel this general sense of like suspicion and a default of distrust and even misanthropy when I walk around in the city, which is something that I never noticed when we lived in small towns, because even there, even if you don't know the person, like people always say that people are friendly in small towns because they all know each other, but I don't exactly think that's true. I think it might be because they see fewer people when they're walking around, and so they're more likely to trust them. And there's almost always a smile and a nod, which you never see in the streets of like a city. Yeah,
for anyone who didn't grow up in a rural town, literally everyone you pass, you do a smile and a wave.
Yeah, it's very shallow.
Yeah.
But it shows I don't hate you. Like my default isn't you're awful.
Yeah, it isn't you might jump me if I look at you the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's person.
Yeah, person.
Yeah. A recent Hitomi video that I watched, she was talking about
who?
I guess it wasn't on this podcast that I used to talk about her so much. Hitomi Majuki. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but she's a YouTuber and she's wonderful, and she talks a lot about becoming an extrovert basically, because she was a chronic introvert her whole life, and then she's still an introvert because it's kind of just like a trait that you have, but how to overcome that and be more personable. And she's always like, in her videos, her and her gal pals and her pals, they're just always like hanging together, and it's like, as you said, when you see it, you're like, interesting, different. But she talks about how good it is for your spirit and your emotions and your person. So her most recent YouTube video, I recommend it because it's called like Finding Intimacy Everywhere or something, and I just think it's lovely. And I like her because she always talks about these things in a very open way from her own experience, and so you can kind of relate to it, because I feel like we've all gone through a very introverted period, and perhaps if you want to break out of your shell, you don't know how to do it, she's your person. Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
So my next thing is going to be herb gardens.
Oh, that's so similar to your other one.
I know, they all are kind of similar.
You're just describing gardening at this point.
Yeah.
The next one is
going to be
carrots.
All gardens. But herb gardens are nice because they bring literal life into a space. They bring a level of competence that we kind of lack when it comes to gardening. And I feel like we get frustrated. It's like I live in a shoebox in a city. Where am I supposed to practice my green thumb? I don't want to go to the urban garden because it's a bunch of hippie granola people and I don't want to be there. Perhaps that's you. I don't know.
Sounds like you.
I go to the garden
sounds like
several
me.
times a week.
Sounds like me.
So you can start your herb garden in your window.
Yeah.
And you have your basil. You have your thyme.
We had one, right, this summer?
Yeah.
What happened to that?
That died.
Yeah, so all of it died.
We had no light. That's, I guess, a problem.
Yeah.
But
sunlight,
it's going to go hand in hand with the gardens. So a practical skill, a competence about food, and like the effort it takes to make this tiny piece of basil.
Yeah.
Imagine how much it's going to take to make these carrots.
We're going to make some pesto.
Yeah. We love pesto here at Solacene.
Well, herbs are kind of like what you were talking about with the details for clothes. They're like that, but for food.
Exactly.
The uncultured tongue, like mine, the tongue of a pig, he doesn't notice the difference between a nicely seasoned piece of toast or just a plain one.
Sesame bagel and an everything bagel, they're the same to
It's
you.
the same to me. It's just different colored dots. But maybe we should be trying to grow our culinary sense.
That was part of my thinking. Was you could the spice of life, the spice of literal life.
Yes.
So you have the same thing for dinner every night, but you have your garden, so you can choose to have a rosemary piece of chicken or a basil piece of pasta. You can tell my culinary skills are really, really exquisite. Another thought that I had with these is that you can share with people because anyone who's grown mint knows that it's basically a weed and it just propagates itself and you're overrun with mint. You can never use that much mint, so you can cut a few sprigs, give it to a friend, and it just builds community. And I think it's really wonderful.
What's your favorite herb? Do you know about chocolate mint?
I do know about chocolate mint.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite though.
It's not my favorite because it's like overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's like this is a green leaf. You think it's going to taste like lettuce, and then it tastes like chocolate mint.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Mint's probably my favorite because I really, really like mint lemonade. That's probably my favorite thing to eat. But I also really like basil because I like basil lemonade. So between mint and basil.
You can tell Alicia filters every taste through how good would this taste in lemonade. Mine is the lemony one, cilantro, which some people I learned they taste it as something like completely different.
I
like
taste
it's a
cilantro as
genetic
onion.
thing. Like it's a genetic thing that some people kind of like with coloring the tongue, they don't taste it as the nice thing. For me, it's delicious. Yeah, it's a thing. Organism of the week.
Let me guess. It's going to be a little nice animal?
Nope. Little. No, I was trying to hint towards bacteria because I always do something weird like that. But it's actually a big, nice thing. It is the red maple tree. Close your eyes while I get the picture. You can look.
He's done it. He went out into the park and he got a red maple leaf. How patriotic.
I am bequeathing this to you as a romantic present.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's the red maple tree. I don't know if this is from a red maple. There's a lot of different types of maples, and the leaves all look very similar to me. When I was
this is
looking
probably
online,
from a maple tree. A normal maple, not a red maple.
Well, I have the other ones that I know grow where I picked this off the ground. Actually, it fell on my head. Funny story. Funny story. It fell off the tree.
Are you kidding?
Onto my head. I know, it's wild.
So Newton-esque.
In the height of autumn. It could also be a Norway maple or a sugar maple. Those are the three options.
Sugar maples.
So I don't know, but the red maple is what I've gone with because it's a red leaf. So I don't know. It's Acer rubrum. All the maples start with Acer. I know this. And it's the most common native tree in eastern North America. It can grow up to 135 foot tall. It's very adaptable to different soil conditions, pH, moisture, stuff like that. Maximum of, what do you think the lifespan is?
175 years.
150 is like what's coined. So maybe one lived to 175. I don't know. Most of them are about 100 or less. And yeah, red maple.
Can I tell you a story about red maple?
Yes.
Since we're just little nice things, it's just a pleasant episode. So, at my house in Nova Scotia, basically it's on the property that my great-grandfather owned, and then they rebuilt the house. So my grandmother and grandfather rebuilt a house about 40 years ago. And when they rebuilt the house, they planted a red maple in the front lawn. So it's just a little twig. And then now, the tree in our front lawn is like the biggest tree you've ever seen. So in 40 years, it's just sprouted. And it's really cool because my parents, when they got engaged, took a picture in front of it and it was still tiny.
Oh.
But then we got engaged and I said we should take a picture in front of it because it's so big.
Yeah.
And then somebody will cart back our pets to take a picture in front of it. I don't know. But yeah, it's cool. It's very significant to me because we climb it. There's like carvings. It's kind of like the giving tree.
Sure.
In our front lawn.
And then you grew up and forgot all about it, just like the giving tree.
Yeah, exactly. I read that 2 days ago and cried.
Right.
And it's like probably the 100th time I read it. It's just always gets you.
Good to see your reading levels moving up.
Thanks. So, I think it's your turn, isn't it?
Sure. My next little nice thing, into the final three. I'll go for interesting ceilings and roofs.
I love a good ceiling.
So this is inspired by the field notes from last week where I talked about cathedrals, specifically the Sacré-Cœur Basilica in Paris, which was just an incredible architecture piece. It was lovely to look at from the outside, or inspiring to look at from the inside. And many, many churches are similar. I was also thinking about Hogwarts, the Great Hall. The fact that your gaze is drawn upwards by this, anything like ornamentation, a big dome, a fresco, just a high ceiling in general. Oh, that's a little bit different of a light fixture. I was thinking of popcorn ceilings.
You love popcorn ceilings.
I know a lot of people don't like them, but I just like anything interesting, especially if it's textured, that makes me want to rub my hand across it, stand on a couch, jump up, press my palms into it. Popcorn. Skylights, that's another thing. I remember in school, I would always, because I'd be so bored in class, like lean back, look up, and just count the dots on those cheap tiles that they use in schools, many public buildings, offices, stuff like that. People know the ones that are all like speckled. So I would count how many are in a small square, try and extrapolate from that, the tile, count how many tiles are in the room, and try and extrapolate how many dots are in the room. So this was, I'm not sure if this is an example of a good thing or like a twisted, monotonous purgatory version of like a nice ceiling, but just looking up and having things to contemplate. It's I think it has an indirect kind of subconscious effect on our self-esteem, especially in churches. I know people have written like essays on that. I mean, how even if you're not Christian, even if you're not religious at all, it just makes you ponder, but in a lovely way. And I think, or doesn't even cover it. AWE, that doesn't even. And also it takes like things off of walls, which I find are almost always too crowded. I like when walls are just left blank or almost blank, especially when things protrude. It'll be like a painting that's kind of sticking out 3 inches. Just put it on the ceiling. That's what I say. Yeah,
I mean, there's just so much space up there. Why not use it for good? I was in a cafe a couple days ago, and I was like standing in line and just like staring probably open-mouthed at the ceiling because I'd never noticed that it was 3D before. And I was like, the people here probably think that I'm just out of it. But I was just staring at it for like ever. And then I was like, I probably should go get my coffee now. But I really liked the ceiling. It had little tiny gold details, and it was just a random cafe, not like a super fancy one or anything. So yeah, just buildings I feel like used to have a bit more. Because like it's always old buildings. It's not like it's usually a new building that chooses to, because that's expensive to do any kind of details in the ceiling.
Yeah, sure.
You're on the ceiling. But yeah.
Right. I had 2 other notes on this. Right now, we as a species are like hunched over moles. I put moles in all capitals with an exclamation point after that. And the other one was that quote from The Founder. I know one of your favorite movies, the kind of dramatized biopic about the guy who supposedly didn't really found McDonald's.
Yeah, my role model.
Yeah, and how he was talking about how when you drive through every American town, you see the courthouse and it has a flag on top. You see the church and it has a cross on top. And we're going to do that, but with our sweet, sweet M made of curly potato fries. Not curly fries, just straight fries, somehow bent. So even that's kind of deceptive. But yeah, just elevating things. Obviously, I don't like McDonald's doing it, but he understood that we elevate these things that we care about and they become icons, or vice versa. But yeah, looking up, Canopies of trees is the same way.
Yeah.
Except, I mean, just being outside in general is the same way. Because, wow, look at these clouds. I love cloud watching. But when you're inside, no clouds to watch. How dull is that? Kind of. Or even like our old apartment compared to the new one that we just moved in. If you're watching on YouTube again, you can see it. Not a very nice place. You feel like moles in the new one because the ceiling on the old one wasn't exactly a frescoed masterpiece, but there was, oh, that's weird. Now what we have is a little hole, tiny little hole through which pokes a straw or something like that.
Yeah, our ceiling
like
now
a peephole.
Nice. Yeah, it's a little ceiling peephole. If you're the people who live above us, please don't look through it. Oh my goodness. Okay, my next thing is small point and shoot cameras. Because you know how when we were young, every family had point and shoot camera. It was either film or digital. And I just want to bring them back. And you know they're kind of having like a trend.
Yeah.
But I feel like
I don't like those kind of trends.
It's kind of an ironic trend.
Yeah.
I would rather, instead of taking our phone everywhere and just shooting pictures mindlessly, that we'd have, like, they can be digital, because I feel like it's slightly less mindless to take a picture with a digital camera than a phone.
Of course. Because it asks more of you. There's a real button to press for one thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to focus. I actually don't know what kind of cameras you're talking about. I don't think I've ever used one.
So,
disposable ones?
Not disposable.
Okay. Just cameras.
Yeah.
Like small.
Like Kodak cameras or Olimpo camera.
So film cameras.
Not always.
Okay.
But I was gonna say a little asterisk was ideally film or like Polaroid. But I also just like I don't know where mine is, but I had like a Kodak camera, and people listening probably know what it is. It has a little screen, and so you can see what you take. And I just want to bring back those and bring back photo albums, because that's my favorite thing, is to gather around a photo album at someone's house.
Right,
Haha,
so you're doing 2
funny.
for 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Haha, they're funny. Oh, look, he used to have hair.
Yeah,
crazy.
Exactly.
Like George Costanza from Seinfeld. I like that one. My next one, I have 2 left. Should I go for the silly one or the awesome one? You get to choose.
Go for the awesome one.
The awesome one, you might say it's also a little bit silly, is quests. This is what I think should come back in the Solacene. That's kind of the route that I've taken, the things that should be more common in the Solacene. You're kind of just listing things you like.
Yeah.
But I'm going for things I like that would help define the Solacene. So quests, because I think quests are where friendships are forged.
Okay.
I unfortunately have never undertaken what I would call a quest. I would love to, if anyone's up for it. If they want to join my party, we're looking for a mage and perhaps a healer. I think that would be really fun. I think that nothing today is so like intense that it's enough to forge a real bond with someone, because everything is small talk. Everything in the office is about the weekend. You're never undertaking a proper challenge and like slaying a beast along the way. And this was partly inspired by the episode that we did on the Patagonia founder, Yvon Chouinard, because he was is a climber, a mountain climber, rock climber, outdoor, all-round adventurist. And I thought that sounded like a really awesome way of structuring one's life, where you are always either recovering from or preparing for another quest, meaning a literal mountain that we're going to go climb. And it's kind of, each one is a milestone. It's how you measure yourself. It's how you test yourself. And this is just like some disparate thoughts, but I was thinking about Solacene for us. That's kind of a quest, right? It's like a capitalistic quest. And I think that's one of the reasons people like capitalism, is because it sells us this idea of a quest that you can go on, grow your company, defeat the other companies. It's like playing a game of Risk, but with money. Or Monopoly, I suppose, is what that is. And whether or not there actually is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you know, a lot of people think that there isn't and it was all a lie or whatever. It's the fun of it. It's the journey. And that's what people live for. And I think, quests, they don't have to be about like conquering a country. Probably wouldn't be actually in the Solacene, but just something. You know what I'm talking about? Some big adventure. Adventure is another word for it. But quest,
it could be just
I like that quest has a connotation of you're looking for something. Yeah.
I like that. I think it could be, okay, we're going to spend a month. We're going to set off with nothing but a compass and a map and try and find this place.
Try and find the treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's cool, because it could just be natural, or it could be, like, we want to try and find a solution. Let's solve cancer.
Yes.
Let's go, boys.
Yes. Exactly, though. Or I was thinking about why so many people, I think, of our generation and maybe a little bit older, romanticize high school and, to a lesser extent, college to such a great degree. And I think it's because it's the last time in our lives that you felt like you were on a quest. You felt like you're on a quest, depending on who you are, to get the girl or the guy, pass the class, make the team, whatever. It's like, it's serious. It matters. You have your enemies, you have your friends, you have your opponents. Literally, though, that's what it feels like to be in school. And when you're an adult, it's just like, no, I don't care, none of that. Because in the office, like, you likely don't care about the work you're doing. So what kind of a quest is that? And it just, it becomes so demoralizing. But I was just thinking about how people kind of romanticize war, like in war movies. Like, they always say that even if a movie tries its best to make war seem awful, it inadvertently ends up romanticizing it. And movies like what's the one with Shia LaBeouf, Fury, where it's like, it's a band of dudes and there's a real fraternity between them. I think most men are missing this, most women probably also, I wouldn't know, but like, just a genuine, forged in some kind of adversity or struggle or difficulty or striving, especially the relationships that it forges. I think that's what we miss most of all. Anyway, that's a little nice thing.
Cool. I have two more. You're gonna say that all mine are the same, but anyway, my next one is folk art, and that is to say, the desire and the skills to just decorate objects. And this is very similar to what I talked about before, but I was specifically thinking about ceramics and everyday objects, so like tables and armoires. And my great grandmother used to have these coat hangers that had this like insanely ornate, I have no idea how it was done, like ribbon work on them. So all of her coat hangers had this case on them, and it's just like, who would take the time, because it probably took hours and hours to put ribbons on all of their coat hangers. The way I'm describing it, it sounds like there's just like a ribbon hanging off of it, but no, it's like a case. It was like a little coat for the coat hangers. Sure. And it's just like,
so it didn't get cold.
Yeah, you wouldn't want your coat hanger to be cold, and I just think we should bring it back.
Alicia's one-woman crusade against minimalism is what this episode could also be retitled as, I think.
That's what I was thinking the whole time. I was like, I feel like I went through this journey of minimalism and trying to like cut back everything and just have everything be super simple and basic. But then I realized that's not really Solacene. That's kind of just... It
could be.
It's practical.
I don't want to put a box on Solacene art.
Yeah, I guess. But it's not like, it's not bringing Marie Kondo. I feel like it's not really bringing the most joy that it could for me.
Yeah, for you. For some people.
Some people.
Like me.
Like you.
Who just really like plain things and space and gets very, very frustrated to the point of rage when there are
too many things.
Too many things.
Yeah. But I think in the Solacene, it'll be a bit more normal.
Yeah.
Because right now I feel like we're all kind of...
Well, it doesn't have to even add space.
Exactly.
Because it could be like... I always remember Virgil Abloh, when he was talking about chairs, he was like, I was designing this chair and I thought to myself, the world doesn't need another chair. So he just made the most simple chair. Because he was like, we don't need any more chairs. And it's kind of like, when you're shopping for things, for instance, furniture, doesn't have to be outrageously cool. You can make it so. Like, you can customize the chair. You can give it a cushion or paint the table.
Yeah. Just making things more unique. I was talking to someone the other day too about, like, they had posted on their Instagram story something about like, we don't need another water bottle, basically just the Virgil Abloh thing of like, please stop inventing water bottles and trying to sell them to us as the new sustainability product. But then I was messaging her because she's a designer, and we were talking a bit about like how I feel like fashion is a bit different than these really utilitarian products, because it's like every piece of clothing that you design can be a work of art basically, but you have to communicate that with the people who are buying it or who you're giving it to, because it's like when we consume products, it's still, we think of them as products, but if we try and think of them a bit more as art or as a project, I think that's better for the world.
Project, not a product. My final one is all about going barefoot.
Okay.
Or socked. Either one of these is great. But I think this is a very freeing feeling. I think it's telling that almost everyone, when they get home after a tough day at work, or in my case, around people, they take off their shoes and they go, because I think, I mean, this is another thing, how much I dislike most shoes, but however comfortable a shoe is touted to be, or actually is, it's nowhere near as nice as just not wearing a shoe. I mean, also the idea that we have walking shoes. I always hate this because what are there all the other shoes for? Like, shouldn't they all be walking shoes? What else are you doing in them? And I think the biggest argument against going barefoot, especially in a city, obviously, is like, but what about all the broken glass and needles and all that stuff? And I'm like, why don't we clean those up? Why are our streets supposedly littered with these things?
Yeah.
So that's like not nice. But in the Solacene, there won't be all that stuff, all those obstacles. Yeah. And the other thing is hygiene issues. It's like, oh, but I don't want to be walking around with everyone barefoot. It's like, but why do everyone's feet smell so bad? Why can't people clean themselves? So in the Solacene, everyone will be of a better hygiene. Or at least, like, I'm not sure it's the case that everyone does stink. I just think, no, this goes to what I was saying earlier, is that we just assume that everyone else will stink.
It's true.
So in the Solacene, either everyone else will be cleaner, or we'll know that everyone else is already clean.
Or we'll just be okay with the smell of feet, the natural smell of feet.
I think part of it comes from shoes.
I agree with that.
So there's like walking around barefoot outside, which I think will be lovely. You can be grounding in the park, which, you know, if you believe in that, that's good. You can be getting sunlight, which doesn't require any kind of belief. That's just a nice thing. It's another avenue. Most people have those pasty feet with an awkward line between them and their sock line. It's true, they do, because everyone's walking around outside in the summer with shoes on.
It's true.
And also indoors. Like, I was thinking about at the cinema. It should be normal to take your shoes off. Not the socks. That's what I was saying. You could stay socked, but that's just more comfortable. Go ahead, laugh at me all you want.
It's just so funny. I feel like you've just touched on a lot of issues with society. We have the opioid crisis with the needles. I feel like you're just
well, that's what I'm saying. A lot of these little nice things will be the tips of very big things, icebergs.
I think it's funny because you wouldn't think talking about shoes would really lead to all these other issues.
Oh, also the shape of feet. If people aren't on this, just look it up online, what shape our feet are supposed to have and how shoes artificially bind them into an awkward pointed shape, and your eyes will be open, and then you'll never look at the footwear industry the same, and the way they try and suppress our natural spreading toes.
This is really your this is your moment.
Yeah. Well, it bothers me. So I think in the Solacene, feet.
Cool. So didn't love that.
Also it helps our feet get tougher.
Yes.
I want to have like monkey feet that can walk around on tree branches and not feel. But now we're so like, oh my skin's too tender. I can't walk on a rock. That should be fine to do.
I mean, humans
balance
can.
Better for balance.
Yeah.
I just want us to all be little Mowglis in the Solacene.
Cool. My final thing.
Also, no, I don't. Oh my else. I'm joking.
Gracious. I was going to throw down over feet here. Okay, my final one is, again, a two-part because I had to try and calm myself. So my final thing is recipe cards and love letters. And those might seem very different, but I think when you look at old recipe cards and old love letters, they have a very similar sentiment in that they're heartfelt expressions of emotion.
Yes.
So with food, I mean, we're going to have a food semester someday, and that's when I'm going to go off the way you just went off about feet.
The foot semester coming when?
Yeah. I have a lot of feelings about food, but I think food can be the way that we communicate a lot of things. I mean, when someone's sick, you bring them soup. When someone's mourning, you say, I can bring you food, and that's just incredibly helpful. Someone's going through a heartbreak, you bring them ice cream. It's just like...
Someone's hungry?
You bring them food. Yeah. So, recipe cards are just so wonderful to me because you are going to say, what should we have for supper? Right now, you go to Pinterest, or you just kind of scratch your head for a few minutes in frustration, and then you make the same thing. But I used to, like, growing up, we had a recipe box. So it was recipes that you'd get from people. You'd go to a potluck and you'd be like, this mac and cheese is to die for. What's your recipe? They'd write down the recipe. Yeah. And then you have just this really wonderful collection of things. And then you pass it down and so on.
You're calling it a card. I'm imagining them all being uniform size and shape, and
index cards.
being like Pokemon cards where you have a deck.
It's basically what it is.
Okay, I've never seen one.
You didn't have a recipe box?
No, we had books, recipe books.
Okay, we had a recipe
box.
box. It still exists. And yeah, so my mom basically, her whole life, collected recipes from grandparents, from friends. And then sometimes you'd find the recipe. Because when you buy a bag of chocolate chips, on the back it has like the chocolate chip recipe. And then you kind of collect your own, or maybe you make that chocolate chip cookie recipe, but you make your changes. Then that's when you kind of finalize it and put it into the collection.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah, so I just really like recipe cards and think they're wonderful.
And also, you wouldn't have to scroll down through pages of story and ads like you do on the internet for most recipes for some reason.
Exactly. And then love letters, obviously kind of similar, but it fosters more poetic people. And I was thinking similar to your hand holding, almost the exact same vein of just like expressing your emotions in a platonic way, but not being afraid to do so. To be like, I think you're really pretty. I think you're really cool. I miss you. Like, and someone to not receive that and be like, what are they getting at? And just be like, oh, my friend, I love them. And I feel like good friends are like that. They're just like really mushy, but just like to make it a little more normal of like, oh, I met this person in university and writing them a letter. I was going to say, I guess it can be digital, but it can't be digital. The physical.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was getting at with all my things.
We don't want
tactile.
NFTs.
Yeah, the tactile part of the Solacene of just like to receive a letter is just so, you just feel absolutely loved in like such a sweet way that I think we should all experience a bit more in the Solacene. Just feeling loved.
That's a very small thing.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, everybody. That's it.
Bye.